The city of Newbridge hummed with the quiet rhythm of a winter evening in 2025, its streets cloaked in a thin layer of frost. Neon signs flickered above Jefferson Street, casting fleeting glows on the cracked pavement below. Behind the Jefferson Street cafe, in a narrow alley where the warmth of a kitchen vent offered brief respite from the biting cold, an old man sat hunched against the brick wall. His name was Elias Carter, though few remembered it. At 69, his weathered military coat hung loosely over his frame, the fabric frayed from years of wear. His dark, lined face bore the weight of decades of service, sacrifice, and survival. Elias wasn't begging, he never did. Instead, he sat quietly, cradling half a sandwich slipped to him by Jimmy, the cafe's cook, a man whose father had once served alongside Elias in Desert Storm. The sandwich was cold now, but it was enough. Elias chewed slowly, savoring each bite, his joints aching from the chill seeping into his bones. Vietnam, Iraq, and the invisible wounds of PTSD and a traumatic brain injury had carved deep lines into his life. Once a staff sergeant in the United States Marine Corps, he now lived on the margins, a forgotten hero in a world that moved on without him. Tonight, though, was different. A patrol car's headlights swept across the alley, and an officer's voice cut through the quiet. "You need to move, sir. You've been warned before." Elias looked up, his gray eyes steady but tired. "Just need 5 more minutes," he said softly, holding up the sandwich. "Please." The officer's patience was thin, worn down by a long shift. "Now," he barked. Elias rose slowly, his body protesting, and gathered his tattered backpack and a folded blanket. He didn't resist, but he didn't hurry either. That was when the cuffs came out. Chapter 1. The courtroom. The courtroom in Newbridge's municipal building was a sterile space, its fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows on the worn wooden benches. Elias Carter shuffled in, wrists cuffed, his head bowed. The clerk's voice was sharp and procedural. "State your name for the record." "Elias Carter," he replied, his voice low and rough, trembling slightly from exhaustion or nerves. "Staff Sergeant, United States Marines." The words carried a weight that seemed to ripple through the room, though no one yet understood why. The gallery was sparse of few reporters, a couple of curious locals, and a silver-haired man in a Marine League jacket, his posture rigid with the discipline of years past. The prosecutor, a young man named Daniel Harper, stood confidently, his suit pressed and his voice polished. "Case for 7B, City of Newbridge versus Elias Carter. Charges: disturbing the peace, trespassing, resisting arrest." Elias sat, his shoulders slumped, the oversized coat swallowing his frame. The prosecutor continued, laying out the case with clinical precision. "Mr. Carter has been warned multiple times about loitering behind the Jefferson Street cafe. The owner filed 3 complaints this month alone. On the night of January 12, 2025, at approximately 11:45 p.m., Officer Reynolds found him in the alley. He refused to vacate when ordered. The officer's testimony followed, his tone matter-of-fact. "He was non-compliant, Your Honor. I gave him a clear directive to leave, and he asked for more time. We can't have people camping out in private alleys." Elias's gaze remained fixed on the floor. He hadn't refused, not in the way they described. He'd only asked for a moment to finish his meal, a small act of dignity in a life stripped of it. But his words hadn't mattered then, and they didn't seem to matter now. Judge Olivia Parker presided over the proceedings, her face a mask of professionalism. At 52, she was known for her fairness and her no-nonsense demeanor. 20 years on the bench had honed her ability to read people, but today, something felt different. As she flipped through Elias's case file, her hand paused, her skin paled slightly, though she masked it quickly. The name Elias Carter wasn't just a name, it was a ghost from her past, a name tied to a letter she'd read countless times, a name her brother, Lieutenant Jack Parker, had written about in his final days. "Mr. Carter," she said, her voice steady but carrying an edge of curiosity. "Do you have legal representation today?" Elias shook his head. "No, ma'am. My public defender got called away. Would you like to speak on your own behalf?" she asked, peering over her glasses. He cleared his throat, the sound rough like gravel. "No excuses, ma'am. Just needed to stay warm." "Why that location?" she pressed, her tone unreadable but laced with something deeper. Elias hesitated, his fingers twitching slightly. "Jimmy, the cook, leaves food sometimes. Known him since he was a boy. His father served with me. Desert Storm. And your service?" Judge Parker asked, deviating from the standard script. The question caught the prosecutor off guard, his brows furrowing. "United States Marine Corps," Elias said, his voice gaining a faint trace of pride. 1975 to 1995, Staff Sergeant, 2nd Battalion, 8th Marines, Vietnam, Iraq. The words landed like stones in still water, ripples spreading through the courtroom. Judge Parker made a quick note, her pen moving with deliberate precision. Before she could continue, the courtroom doors swung open. A man in a tailored navy suit strode in, his presence commanding attention. He carried a leather briefcase and moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to winning. "Your Honor," he said, reaching the defense table. "Alexander Ross, attorney. I've just been retained to represent Mr. Carter. I apologize for the abruptness." Elias turned, confusion etching deeper lines into his face. He hadn't called a lawyer, he couldn't afford one, certainly not one like this, with cufflinks gleaming under the courtroom lights. "This is highly irregular," Judge Parker said, her eyes narrowing. "The court was not informed of new representation." "A last-minute development," Ross replied smoothly. "I respectfully request a brief recess to confer with my client." Judge Parker studied them both, her expression giving nothing away. 15 minutes, she said, rising and retreating. To her chambers, Elias leaned toward Ross. "I don't have money for this," he whispered. "You won't need it," Ross replied, his voice low. "My firm, Williams, Ross and Parker, is taking this pro bono." Elias's brow furrowed at the name Parker, like the judge. "Exactly like the judge," Ross said with a faint smile. In her chambers, Olivia Parker removed her glasses, her hands unsteady. She'd seen countless cases, heard countless stories, but none had ever shaken her like this. She opened a desk drawer and pulled out a faded photograph herself, young and smiling, standing beside her brother, Jack, in his Marine dress uniform. His arm rested proudly across her shoulders, their smiles full of hope. Next to the photo was Jack's final letter from Iraq, its edges worn from years of careful handling. She unfolded the letter, her eyes scanning the familiar words. Jack had written about a firefight outside Fallujah in 2004, his unit pinned down under heavy enemy fire. A staff sergeant named Elias Carter had charged through the chaos, dragging Jack to safety and covering the retreat of others. "If not for him," Jack had written, "none of us would have made it." 2 weeks later, Jack was killed by an I'd at his funeral. A Marine had approached Olivia and her parents, his voice heavy with guilt and gratitude. "Your son saved my life," he'd said. "I was the one he carried." He hadn't stayed long, disappearing back into the ranks. Olivia had never forgotten his name, Elias Carter. She'd tried to find him, hoping to learn more about Jack's final moments. But the Marine Corps said he'd redeployed, then later discharged with severe PTSD and a traumatic brain injury. His trail had gone cold, and she'd assumed he was lost to time. Now, impossibly, he sat in her courtroom, charged with petty crimes. Born of desperation, a knock interrupted her thoughts. Alexander Ross stepped inside, his face etched with concern. "Olivia, what is this?" "It's him, Alex," she said, gesturing to the photograph. "The Marine who saved Jack. The one who carried him out of that ambush." Ross's eyes widened. "The homeless veteran in your courtroom?" Olivia nodded. "His service record confirms it. Fallujah 2004, same unit as Jack. He was awarded the Silver Star for that day." "Does he know who you are?" Ross asked. "I doubt it. I took Thomas's name after law school. He wouldn't recognize me now. It's been 20 years. She took a breath, steadying herself. "How does a hero like that end up like this? Alex, alone, on trial for trying to stay warm." Ross shook his head. "From what he told me, it's been a long road. PTSD, a marriage that fell apart while he was overseas, benefits tangled in bureaucracy. He worked construction until his injuries made it impossible. Then came job loss, eviction, the streets." Olivia closed her eyes, Jack's voice echoing. In her memory, Carter was the best of us, he'd written, the kind of Marine who'd risk everything for his brothers. "You could recuse yourself," Ross said gently. "No one would question it." "No," Olivia replied firmly. "I'm not letting him disappear again." "There are ethical risks," Ross warned, "and ethical obligations," she countered, "especially to those who gave everything for this country." When Judge Parker returned to the courtroom, her posture was impeccable, her voice steady, but her hands betrayed a slight tremor as she adjusted her papers. "Mr. Ross," she said, "has your client made a decision?" Ross stood. "Yes, Your Honor. We request dismissal of all charges. Mr. Carter wasn't trespassing. He was trying to survive a dangerous freeze, and we can demonstrate that restaurant employees gave him implied permission to be on the premises." The prosecutor, Harper, began to object, but Judge Parker silenced him with a raised hand. "I have questions for the defendant," she said, her focus shifting to Elias. "Mr. Carter, your military file lists Fallujah 2004. Is that correct?" Elias straightened. "Decades of discipline resurfacing." "Yes, ma'am. 2nd Battalion, 8th Marines." "And on April 17th, were you part of an operation near the western edge of the city?" Confusion flickered across his face. "Yes, ma'am. We were escorting a supply convoy when we got ambushed. During that firefight," she pressed, "did you rescue a wounded officer, Lieutenant Jack Parker, while under enemy fire?" The courtroom fell silent. Ilias's eyes narrowed, the name stirring memories long buried. "Parker," he said softly. "Yes, young lieutenant, brave. Took a hit trying to pull a wounded medic out of the line of fire. I reached him, dragged him behind cover. He kept shouting to help the others instead, told me to leave him." In the gallery, the silver-haired man in the Marine League jacket leaned forward, his attention raised sharp. "And what became of Lieutenant Parker?" Judge Parker asked, her voice composed but trembling beneath the surface. "We got him on the bird," Elias said, his voice catching. "He made it to Germany. I heard, but a few weeks later, his convoy hit an IED. He paused, his gaze distant. "For years, I've wondered if saving him only delayed the inevitable. Maybe I made it worse." Before anyone could respond, the silver-haired Marine stood abruptly. "That's H.M., he said, his voice cutting through the room. "That's Staff Sergeant Carter. I was there. He saved 6 of us that day." Judge Parker tapped her gavel once, the sound lacking its usual force. "Order," she said, though her voice wavered. The courtroom settled into a tense hush. Elias kept his gaze low, uncomfortable under the sudden spotlight. The Marine didn't sit. "Your Honor," he said, "I don't mean to interrupt, but I was there. Carter took fire pulling that lieutenant out, took 2 rounds himself." The prosecutor stood. "Your Honor, while Mr. Carter's service is commendable, it's not relevant to these charges." Judge Parker's eyes flashed. "The court disagrees. It is deeply relevant." She set her gavel down slowly. "This court will reassess for 10 minutes. Please see that Mr. Carter remains here." As she started to leave, she paused, her eyes meeting Ilias's for the first time. "Mr. Carter," she said softly, "when I return, there are matters beyond this case we need to discuss." In her chambers, Olivia's composure cracked. She pressed her fingers to her lips, stifling a sob. 20 years of grief, gratitude, and unanswered questions surged to the surface. She picked up the phone, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Colonel Matthews, it's Olivia Parker. I need a favor, and I need it urgently." 10 minutes later, she returned to the courtroom, accompanied by 3 Marines. Colonel James Matthews, a master sergeant, and a young corporal carrying a polished wooden case. The sight of their uniforms sent a ripple through the room. Elias stood instinctively, his posture snapping to attention despite the ache in his joints. Judge Parker took her place but set her glasses aside, a rare gesture. "Before we proceed," she said, her voice clear, "I must share a personal connection to this case." She looked directly at Elias. "Lieutenant Jack Parker was my brother." Gasps echoed through the room. Elias's brow furrowed, recognition dawning. Olivia continued, her voice steady but her eyes glistening. 20 years ago, my brother wrote about a staff sergeant who saved his life in Fallujah. He ran through enemy fire to reach him, then covered his unit's retreat. That man was you, Sergeant Carter." The silver-haired Marine stepped forward again. "It's true, Your Honor. I saw it. Carter took 2 rounds, pulling that officer to safety." Olivia nodded. 2 weeks after that day, my brother was killed in action. At his funeral, Marines spoke of his courage, but also of the man who gave us 2 extra weeks with him. "I tried to find you, but you were gone redeployed, then discharged. No one could tell me where you went." Elias stood silent, emotions warring across his face. "I never stopped searching," Olivia said. "And now, by fate or something higher, you're here." She motioned to Colonel Matthews. "This is Colonel James Matthews, my brother's commanding officer. He has something to share." Matthews stepped forward. "Staff Sergeant Carter, the Marine Corps has been trying to locate you. Your personnel file was reviewed under the Veterans Reconsideration Initiative. New intelligence from your deployments warranted an update to your commendations and benefits." The corporal opened the wooden case, revealing a medal on blue velvet. "By order of the Secretary of the Navy," Matthews said, "the Navy Cross is hereby awarded to Staff Sergeant Elias J. Carter for extraordinary bravery on April 17, 2004. Your actions saved Lieutenant Parker and 5 others. disrupting an ambush that could have wiped out the convoy. Your Silver Star has been formally upgraded. Ilias's jaw tightened, his voice barely audible. There must be some mistake. I just did my job. No mistake, Sergeant, Matthews replied. This is long overdue. From the gallery, a voice rang out. Attention on deck. The silver-haired Marine stood at attention, joined by others, veterans, civilians, even the prosecutor, caught in the moment. The entire room rose, saluting Elias Carter. Judge Parker wiped at her tears. In light of these developments, all charges against Staff Sergeant Carter are dismissed permanently. Her gavel struck with finality. This courtroom is adjourned. As the room settled, the Master Sergeant approached Elias with a tablet. Sir, we've been trying to correct your VA records. Your disability rating is now 100% service-connected, retroactive to your discharge. You're entitled to full back pay, medical coverage, housing assistance, and educational benefits. Ross stepped forward. My firm will ensure every piece of that is processed. No more delays. Jimmy, the cook, approached, tears in his eyes. My dad told me about a Marine who saved his platoon. He said, if you ever meet Elias Carter, you owe him everything. I never knew it was you. The prosecutor, visibly shaken, offered a quiet apology. Sir, I had no idea. I'm sorry for how this was handled. Judge Parker stepped down from the bench, approaching Elias. My brother told us what you said that day. No Marine gets left behind. Not while I'm still breathing. Today, we keep that promise to you. 2 weeks later, Elias stood in a modest apartment, part of a veterans housing program. The walls were bare except for a frame displaying his Navy Cross, Purple Hearts, and service medals, recovered by Ross from a long-lost storage locker. A knock sounded, and Olivia Parker stood at the door, holding a small box. May I come in, Sergeant Carter? She asked. Just Elias, he said with a humble smile. Then it's just Olivia, she replied, stepping inside. She opened the box, revealing a bundle of letters from Jack. He wrote about you often, she said, handing one to Elias. This one's from the day after you saved him. Elias read aloud, his voice trembling. Staff Sergeant Carter did something yesterday I still can't believe. He moved through enemy fire like it didn't exist. Refused to leave me, even when I ordered him to. No Marine gets left behind, he said. Olivia smiled softly. He looked up to you. After he died, I started the Veterans Court program because of what he wrote about the system forgetting its own. I'm not a hero, Elias said. I just did what needed doing. That's what heroes always say, Olivia replied. The day Jack died, he was leading a mission to protect civilians. He volunteered because he wanted to live up to your example. Ilias's eyes glistened. For years, he'd wondered if his actions had mattered. He didn't die because of you, Olivia said. He lived the way he did because of you. They sat in silence, snow falling outside, blanketing the city in quiet. For years, Ilias said, I thought no one remembered, like none of it mattered. It did, Olivia said. To Jack, to every Marine you saved, to me. As she left, she placed a hand on his shoulder. Jack said the measure of a Marine is what he does when no one's watching. You lived that, Elias, even when the world forgot. Elias stood taller, a quiet strength returning. Someone remembered my name, he said softly. After all this time, in that moment, something long broken began to heal, not just in Elias Carter, but in the promise that no hero should be left behind.